Sarah? Gosh, I didn't even see you pop in here.
Hi, no worries, no worries.
I'm Kristen. I'm part of the Futurology team, so I will just briefly introduce you guys and then let you go. So
Sounds great.
support and to answer some Q&A if any of our parents have any. Last night was our showcase, so we didn't have any breakouts or anything like this. So
Okay.
I'm hoping that it'll be a little bit more specific tonight, but we'll see.
Okay, sounds good.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kristen. I am going to be co-hosting this presentation this afternoon as a part of our virtual college fair offerings for CUSD. I know that today was everyone's first day back in a hybrid setting, so I'm really proud of you guys for showing up and for participating in some of our breakout sessions today and throughout the rest of the week. For your information, your microphone and your camera are turned completely off, so we can't see or hear you. You can ask questions using the Q&A button at the bottom. We have two awesome presenters who I'm going to let introduce themselves and talk more about their institutions and their schools. This presentation is going to run for about 45 minutes, and we should have some questions or time for questions at the end or throughout the presentation if you have additional ones. These slides will also be uploaded to our website along with the recording at the end of the week as soon as the virtual college fair concludes. So with that, I am going to take it away and give it up for both Larry and Sarah, who are here to talk to us about options for students with learning differences.
Larry Alterman. I am the manager of East Coast recruitment for Michigan State University.
And I'm Sarah Vogt. I'm from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, where I am a disability services coordinator, as well as I oversee our student success programs.
And so we're going to get started and share our thoughts. We will have time at the end for your questions. You can even put questions in the Q&A if you want now or as things go along. And we promise we will allow plenty of time for your questions.
All right, so I'll start. So as I said, I'm from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. We have actually two campuses now. So whereas we used to just be a four-year public university in South Central Wisconsin between Milwaukee and Madison, we now have a four-year campus and a two-year campus. And so we have about 1,300 students distributed between both campuses. And we offer associates, bachelor's, master's, doctoral, and certificate programs. The University of Wisconsin-Whitewater was deemed a flagship campus for the UW system in the 70s and is still nationally recognized for its services provided to students with disabilities. Working with students with disabilities and providing that equal access is a priority mission of our university. And 10% of our students identify as a student with a disability. We also have a nationally recognized men's and women's wheelchair basketball team.
So Michigan State University is a large 4-year public university in the lower central part of the state of Michigan. We do have about 50,000 students who come from all 50 states, including beautiful California, and 130 countries. We have one main campus in East Lansing, Michigan. We offer associates, bachelor's, master's, doctoral, and certificate programs. We are a land grant mission. And so because of that, it is a priority mission for us to create access across campus, as opportunity and access is a major part of our founding all the way through to today. We do have lots of different ways where there's collaboration across campus for this. For example, our College of Engineering Design Day, every year they take on different projects of how they can make Michigan State more accessible, how we can service more students so that they can have the opportunity for an education. And now Sarah's going to take us through some slides.
Yeah, so when we say students with disabilities, what does that mean? Of course, it's going to include students with physical disabilities and students who are blind or low vision, deaf or hard of hearing. But we also, the majority of the students that we work with have what are called invisible or non-apparent disabilities. So we work with, and a lot of students have multiple disabilities as well. So students with learning disabilities or attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, students with psychological disabilities like anxiety, major depression, students with traumatic brain injuries or post-concussion syndrome, students on the autism spectrum, students with chronic health conditions. So all of these students have been successful, can be successful in college, and are also eligible for services at our university. So, and actually all universities and colleges. Larry, if you could go to the next screen. So students with disabilities are protected under 2 laws, and this changes. So from K through 12, students with disabilities are covered under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. And then once you get to college, that no longer pertains. And so students are covered with by the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, as well as its amendments that were passed in 2008, and the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And so because IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, no longer is in place for post-secondary education, what services are available to students and what types of accommodations are available is going to be a little different. And we'll talk about that more later.
And so now I will get started talking about college admissions. So when you're starting off in this process, there are a lot of different things to consider. And there are a lot of different types of places to go for an education beyond K through 12. And in the 2-year, the 4-year options, there are many options. So this is very individual. This is a process of discovery. And when I say that, not just discovering that something's out there, but it's really in a lot of ways up to the student of figuring out what is it that's out there and what it means to them. So you would start off, you may look at a technical college. This may have, certain areas, certain things that you're interested in. Maybe more limited in your choices of how many majors, but this is one option. Associate degrees. There are many 2-year degrees that can be very valuable and can get you started on a certain path. This may be right for you. a 4-year public university? What is it about the school and the student body? All very important. The 4-year private. Maybe it's a combination. So you may start off, for example, even in a community college for a year or 2 years, and then you may transfer to a 4-year public, a 4-year private. And then something that I think the students have to really ask themselves, are you ready for an on-campus college experience? Are you ready, as I might say, to run your own life, to run your own show? And so you really have to think about, how much do your parents do for you? Could you use more time for transition? And you know what? Answering these questions honestly for yourself is going to benefit you, the student, more than anyone else. Because ultimately, this whole process is about you, the student. Now, I can't encourage you enough to ask questions. I think all students need to understand, and it's good for the parents to understand as well, what is the cost of attendance? It's tuition, it's room and board. Is there travel involved? Are there other expenses? What is that cost by institution? And some of that may be offset by some financial aid and what's available. The location. So not just that Michigan State, for example, is in the middle of, the middle of Michigan, but are we in a big town? Are we in a small town? What is that all about? What are the available majors? And majors is intentionally plural. Because if you look, and you'll see, if you do a search on Google, you're going to see 40 to 50% or more of college students change their major at least once. So you need to really give yourself that chance to change and to understand the ability to change. The size. So some of this is how large of a school, but also even within very large schools like Michigan State, we have some very small programs where you can be in a small group setting. And what's the reputation? Those are some things I think everyone should ask. But then if you have some disabilities, I think obviously you need to ask about disability services and how are services provided. I think you need to understand general education and major requirements. So, there are some majors that, for example, I'll just use an example, math. There are some majors that have very little math. There's some that require a lot of math. There's some majors that may require a foreign language. Some may not, and some of it is going to be based on that particular university. What are the class sizes? And realistically, how might this change over time? Also, even how are the classes taught? Is it lecture style? Is it more discussion based? How much of a mix is there? What kind of tutoring options are there? Is there a cost for tutoring options? Are there placement tests? What is campus accessibility like? Accessibility means a lot of things. Is it a fit for you? That's ultimately what this is. What kind of personal care options are there? What kind of adaptive and assistive technology is there? Are there summer bridge programs to aid in the transition? Can advise enough to visit campus, try out accessibility features, meet with disability services staff. Many campuses offer different options for you to meet with students and communicate with students with disability. Maybe you can try a transition program or a camp to get an idea a little bit about the culture of the campus and the nearby area. Some of the variables may be more important than others. This is about you creating your own priority list. What is the most important? What is the next most important? What is the third most important thing? You need to choose a school that is a right fit, and asking those questions and really investigating, that's how you find that out. And school counselors can help you in terms of asking the right questions. And so now this next piece, I want to talk about the difference between high school and college. And you know, this is really different. So now you're in school, or if you're virtual, you're virtual. But in most cases, in a normal year, you're in school probably 35 hours a week. It's almost like a prison. Because in college, you're going to be in class 12 to 15 hours a week. We're giving you all of that free time. But study time is a little bit different, because in college, it's suggested you spend 2 to 3 hours in prep time for each hour of class time. So if that was 3 hours and you were in class 12 to 15 hours a week, that might be almost a 60-hour a week then, between class and studying. In high school, tests and quizzes happen often. In college, you may only have a few graded assignments for the whole semester. That might even include a final exam. Might be just one of a few graded opportunities. In high school, just passing keeps your seat. But in college, you need to have basically a C or a better. And then in terms of support systems, in high school, you'll probably have the same case manager, maybe for the whole time. In college, there may be some different faces. There may be some new faces over your time. And now Sarah's going to take us through about accessing services.
Thank you. Okay, to continue the discussion about differences between high school and college, and I mentioned this earlier, you're not, because the law changes, you're not going to have an IEP or a 504 plan in college. Instead, you will still have access to accommodations, and you will have an accommodation plan, but how that works is going to be different, and what you're eligible for is going to be different. So how do you establish services in college? Now, the biggest difference is gonna be that students have to take the lead. Students have to empower themselves. And so students who have accommodation needs, they have to self-identify with the Disability Service Office. So every school, every college, every university has to have some person or office that works with students on accommodations, okay? So at our school, that's called the Center for Students with Disabilities. At other schools, it might be called the Disability Resource Center or Disability Services, etc. So you need to reach out to that respective office, figure out what their process is so that you can say, hey, I have a disability, I have needs, how do I get set up for services and get my accommodation plan? The biggest difference between high school and college in terms of accommodations is that with the change in law, students are no longer eligible for modifications. So if you as a student only had to do, well, I'll go through these first and then I'll give an example. So typically in college, you're not going to be allowed to retake exams unless an instructor allows all students to retake exams. You're going to be taking the same test as everyone else. If you have in your IEP or 504 plan right now, if it says that you have a reduced number of multiple choice answers, for example, so let's say the rest of the class has to choose from 5 options and you only have to choose from 3. That's no longer going to be possible. You're getting the same degree as everyone else. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires equal access. We're not changing any of the essentials or the requirements, okay? You probably won't be able to get extended time on assignments either. And that's in your best interest, because if you had extended time on assignments, it would take you way too long to complete each class. And because you're not in school for 35 hours a week, 6 to 8 hours a day, instead, that extended time, that longer time you need on assignments is gonna be more of a time management issue. Okay, so you really want to work on time management skills so that you can plan out, okay, so this assignment is due in a week. This is how long I expect it to take. And so I need to plan that time out. You also, unless everyone in the class gets it, you won't be able to get notes for your exams. You won't be able to use your notes or books. And then, as I said, you're doing the same work as everyone else, so you have to do the same assignments, you have to learn the same material because you're getting the same degree. The last big difference between high school and college is going to be FERPA, and that's the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act. And basically what that means is once you start college, you're an adult. And so you take the lead as the student. Your family members will not be able to access any of your educational information unless you give them permission to do so. I won't, as a disability resource coordinator, I don't have access to certain information. So your case manager right now may know everything like attendance, what's due and if it's been turned in or not. That kind of information is not going to be out there. There's still supports for you. Your family members can still help you, but how that looks is going to be different because you are now an adult and you have to take the lead. Next slide. Okay, so how do you access services? All right. So typically, typically the instructions will be if you go to a university's webpage or a college's webpage and search disability services, they should have a website that talks about their individual process. Typically, what you're going to do is submit an application for services to the Disability Service Office. Depending on the school, that's either going to be before you apply for admission or after. I would say in most cases, you're going to apply for services after you've been admitted to a university or college and decide, yes, I want to go there. So you apply for services. Then along with that, you're going to have to submit some sort of documentation that describes how your disability impacts you or how your disabilities impact you as it relates to school. An IEP can be helpful information, but a school may need more than that. So they may need your most recent disability or neuropsychological educational evaluation so that we have the details. Because what we really want to know, because you and I could have the exact same disability, but completely different needs. And so what we really want to know is how are things impacting you? Because that's going to help us tailor the access that you need. And as part of that process, so we get the application for services, the documentation, then you'll get set up with a disability services coordinator to have an intake appointment before your first semester. That's really important. And you really want to be open and honest in those appointments about the strengths that you have, the difficulties that you experience, the strategies that you've tried and what has been successful and what not, because that's where we're going to get together and come up with an accommodation plan. Because you are the expert in your needs. You may still be learning exactly what you need, but you are the expert in what does and does not work. And so we need to hear from you as the student to determine your accommodation plan. In that meeting or in a subsequent meeting, later meeting, will also help you learn how to request and use your accommodations, because again, unlike high school, you'll be going to classes. Your instructors, because of that FERPA and confidentiality of disability, your instructors do not automatically know that you have accommodations. So you need to work with the Disability Service Office to say, okay, what is the process at this school for informing my professors that I get accommodations? And the disability coordinator is there to help you with that process. And we're also there to help you get, answers to your questions. I'm happy to be, a resource to students for any questions they have, whether it's disability related or not, because college is new and you're transitioning and sometimes you don't know where to go for what questions. So I'm happy to be a first face, a happy face, first point of contact, whatever you want to call it, to help you learn how to navigate the university. Okay, next slide. All right, so I briefly mentioned this. What does documentation mean? And again, you'll find details on each web page, but it's always good to reach out to the respective office to talk about their documentation guidelines. Because for example, our documentation guidelines look very strict on our website. However, if you talk with us about what you have, that may be sufficient. We don't want you having to go out there and spending thousands of dollars on tests or anything like that if that's not necessary. So it's always good to review the website, but then also reach out to the office to explain, okay, this is what I have in terms of documentation. What else would I need for your services? Possible documentations might be medical documentation from a specialist if you have a chronic health condition, or from a psychologist. You may have a neuropsychological report, an educational evaluation. Like we said, the IEP or SOP 504 plan is helpful, but not always enough. It really depends. Each school is different in terms of how detailed those plans are. And the student is responsible for providing the documentation to the Disability Services Office. So we're not going to have access to that information unless you initiate the process and you reach out to us. So, like I said, everyone will have their own documentation guidelines. So you want to go to the website and then follow up with that school to find out the specific requirements. Okay, next slide. However, pretty much across the board, documentation must be completed by an appropriate licensed professional. It has to, what we're really looking for is a diagnosis that verifies eligibility. You are covered under the, you're covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we want to make sure that you're eligible for services. So for example, test anxiety is not something that's covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. Generalized anxiety disorder is. So we want documentation that helps verify eligibility and then also discusses functional limitations, or how that disability, how that diagnosis impacts you specifically. We want to make sure that it's current. Some disabilities never change, but some fluctuate over time. And so we want to make sure that it's accurate to how your disability is impacting you right now. And then also support the request for accommodations. Next slide. All right, so what are some common accommodations? Okay, so like I said, I started with the bad news first. What might not be possible in college, right? And so modified tests or extended time on all your assignments is not going to be possible. However, if you get extended time, if you need extended time on exams or quizzes, that is most likely going to be possible. The ability to take an exam or quiz in a low distraction room. If you need sign language interpreting or captioning. The assistance with note taking. And that, depending on what schools have availability for, that can either be a note taker, paid note taker, another student in their class who volunteers to share their notes, or it might be technology. We're relying more and more on technology so that students can become more independent. Maybe you have access to ebooks or other software to read exams, or speech to text software. And then other assistive technology. And so, for example, at UW-Whitewater, we have licenses for various technologies so that students can use them while they're students for free. So for example, we have something called Audio Note Taker. which is a note-taking assistance application. We also have Kurzweil, which is an ebook reading software. And also it helps you with some writing skills and things like that. So each school has to provide that equal access, but how that looks is going to be different depending on the student's needs and what the school can provide. So next slide. So what should students be doing to prepare for college? You want to start practicing your independence, okay? Now, no one's expecting you to be 100% independent all the time for everything. No one is, right? And we recognize that when you start college, you're going to be transitioning and learning how to be more and more independent, how to advocate for your own needs. But you want to start practicing that. So you definitely want to start, if you're not already, attending your own IEP or 504 meetings so that you can start to learn how to talk about your disability and your needs to prepare for that meeting with your disability services coordinator. If you can, you want to start scaling back on those modifications that aren't offered in college. So if you have to read or write less than everyone else in school, if you're doing different assignments or different tests, see if you can take that back and focus mainly on the accommodations that are offered in college, like having your exams read aloud to you or that extended time, things like that. Figure out the best ways to study. As Larry said earlier, you know, a lot of habits in high school is how much do you study? Well, whatever you need, right? Get in the habit of coming up with a study plan that works for you. Are you someone that studies from notes or rereading material? Are you someone that has to practice? So taking quiz or using flashcards. So use different methods to see what really works for you. While also getting to know the functional limitations of your disability. Now, so I identify as a disabled person and as someone with a disability. And as someone with a disability, I can say, look, sometimes we don't know how to say what our limitations are because it's normal to us. This is our normal, right? So you may want to ask your teachers or parents, hey, what have you noticed that I struggle with or that that's a really great strength of mine that may be related to my disability, so that you can start getting comfortable talking about that. And along with that, you want to practice advocating and asking for help. Maybe your senior year, you actually lead your IEP meeting. One of the biggest things that you want to do is make sure to start using organizational tools and time management. Figure out what works for you in terms of keeping track of assignments and due dates and tests and materials so that, you know, whether it's written planner or a calendar, using Google Calendar or reminders on your phone, because you're no longer going to have a mapped out schedule for you every day. Instead, you're going to have to figure out, you have a lot of free time, as Larry said earlier, but there's a lot of stuff you have to do within that free time. And so you really want to work on your time management skills so that when you get to college, you can figure out a good balance between going to class, schoolwork, doing your laundry, eating, having fun. You know, everything is really important and needs to be balanced out. But in order to be able to figure out that balance, you're going to need to have time management skills and organization. And then finally, you want to make sure you connect with the vocational rehab services in your county, because they may be able to provide you with services such as assistive technology, or some students, vocational rehab in our state often pay for some tutoring support that we offer, or we have an adaptive transportation program that they often pay for. So how can vocational rehab services in your county help you transition to, prepare for, and, you know, thrive in college? Next slide. All right. So that's my spiel, that's our spiel, and we are ready to open it up for questions.
Okay, so I think we have some questions here in the Q&A. So Sarah, if you can take that first question there.
All right, so the first question is, we have on the call a parent of a graduating senior with ADHD and dyslexia. Need info on how to access disability services on campus. So what I would recommend is, you know, of the colleges that you and your student are looking at, you want to go to their start with their website, type in that disability services, and it should, at the very least, you'll find contact information for that person or office so that you can contact them, have a conversation about setting up services. A lot of schools will also do prospective student appointments. So if you're visiting a campus, maybe along with a campus tour, you can visit and speak with someone in disability services so that you guys can be more specific about the services they could offer your student. And there's often information just on the website. So basically each school is going to be a little different. And so you want to seek that out based on the school that you're interested in, or the schools, I should say. And then just real quick to add to what Larry was saying earlier about, you know, finding the right path for you. I personally think it's important you do all that research ahead of time on the web to find schools you might be interested in, the right, you know, good sizes, majors. I really think you should visit because you want to find a school that has the program or programs you're interested in, feels like home, and has the services that you need. Because although everyone's required to provide access to students with disabilities, what that looks like can be very different. And so, you know, what your needs are and what that office can provide you can look different. Okay. Should I jump to the second question, Larry?
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, perfect. And I can do the third one, or okay. I heard that you said no extended time for assignments, for example, but how about extended time for tests? Absolutely. That's one of the most common accommodations at college is going to be that extended time on exams and quizzes. Typically, that's going to look like time and a half. So for every hour of an exam, you get an extra half hour. But depending on your needs, that might look differently. So yes, if you're eligible for accommodations, most likely extended time is going to be one of them for exams and quizzes. All right. What might typical college accommodations look like if you won't be given additional time for test taking or assignments? Unlikely I can be given notes from lectures, etc. Okay, so I may have been a little confusing. So as I said, one of the most common accommodations is gonna be test taking accommodations, so extended time on tests. Assignments, you know, depending on the situation, you may or may not be able to request an extension. You just won't get double time on all your assignments or time and a half on all your assignments, okay? And then depending on your needs and how the professor works, some professors share their notes with all students. And you're probably getting more comfortable with this now that we're doing a lot of remote learning. So a lot of schools use systems like Canvas or Blackboard. And so professors may post their PowerPoints there. As we move forward with COVID, they may post their lecture recordings, etc., so that things are accessible after the fact. But then most schools also have some sort of note-taking assistance for students with disabilities, whether that's through other technologies, paid note takers, or volunteer note takers. So I'm sorry if I'm coming off as you won't get this, you won't get this. There's a lot that you could be eligible for. It's just gonna look different. Okay, also, what do we do about prescriptions for ADHD meds in other states? Will a student need a doctor in that state to prescribe? That is a very good question. So again, with more and more telehealth, I have a feeling students will be able to continue working with their current doctors, and then the doctor would just call in specific, because I know you can't get ADHD and other regulated medications are difficult to get because you can't just call in refills. However, whether it's in state or not, a lot of students can't go to their doctor's office every 30 days or every 90 days to get a new prescription. And so there are ways to work around that, such as, I think telehealth visits are becoming more popular. Doctors will prescribe certain things until they know the student will be coming home for a break. So there are options. I don't have like a specific solution. What I would do is talk with your doctor. And then what I usually do when I'm meeting with students and I know that they're gonna have meds that they need, whether they're restricted or not, we talk about the different pharmacies that are available in our area so that they can also reach out to that pharmacy to say, what would I need to transfer my prescription here or to make sure that I can still get access to this prescription.
And then we have one question in the chat right now.
Okay.
The bottom question, because we've answered the top one already.
Okay. Is there a list of top 10 colleges known to be supportive of students with ADD/generalized anxiety disorder? There are. I'm trying to remember. I'm gonna actually look. I know that we're listed as a top 10 school, but I'm not sure who stated that. So let me look that up real quick.
And while we're looking that up, if anyone
Yes.
has any additional questions, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A. I think Q&A is better than chat. It's just easier for us to clear out. And if anyone has any questions related to the admissions process, you can certainly go ahead and ask those.
And then so as I'm looking, it looks like we were designated disability friendly online colleges from an SR education group. But what I was looking at more, so collegechoice.net has a list, and maybe I can put this in the chat feature, 50 best disability friendly colleges and universities. So I will put that in the chat. All right, there we go. So that might be a good place to start. I will recommend though, is that's a good place to start, but again, like you said, it's student, this may be general disability, and what does that mean? And so what might be a really friendly college for one student with a disability might be not as great for another student with a disability. And so those are questions that you definitely want to ask, when you're meeting with disability services offices or tours, going on campus tours. You want to ask questions like, how are professors typically, or how are the instructors typically with accommodations? Do you have a lot of issues with your instructors, or are they pretty good at working with students with disabilities? I think that's a very valid and fair question to ask. And the disability service professionals will have answers to that, hopefully.
So here's a question, a little more on the admission side, I'll call it. Is it a good idea to talk about learning challenges in your essay? It's certainly a salient point and integral to the student experience. So my answer is yes, but I want to expand a little more on this. So I have read now over 10,000 college essays. So I'm very lucky to have been able to do all that reading. And the best essays are the ones where a student is clearly passionate about a subject. And so I encourage you to bring that passion to that subject. So if you want to write about that, it's wonderful. But really, use that and make that your story. And the key is that it's, well written. And that it's in your voice. But it's a great way for the university to learn about you. And again, the best ones are like I said, the ones where, a student's really passionate about the subject. So if that's something you want to talk about, honestly, that's great. Do not feel you have to talk about it, but it is fine. If you are enthusiastic about talking about it and bringing that out, that's great. Because then if you are, that'll transfer. We feel that when we're reading them. You know, when we're reading them, we can really feel when someone is telling us a story, telling us something they want to share. So that would be great. One thing I will bring up, no one asked questions, but in terms of admissions this year, if you are a senior, there are more schools than ever before that are test optional. Test optional very much means just that it's your option of whether you submit a test score or not. What I do recommend as you're going through the admissions process, if you're looking for admissions requirements for a particular school, please go directly to that school's website, that school's admission site, because we update our site literally all the time. And certainly right now, in an era, in a year like no other, 2020, a word you should think about in terms of admission is the word fluid. Everything is changing, everything can change. And so really look at those individual schools you're thinking of applying at their admissions page for all the requirements, so you do all you need to do. And then you'll also find out information like, for example, if they are test optional. The reason I say use the university sites, there are many third-party sites. Sometimes the information's updated all the time, sometimes it isn't. We're responsible for what information is on our website. All universities are. But is it really optional? Yes, it is really optional. It is really optional. And you know, before this year, there were many schools that were already test optional. And some of those were schools that were very ultra competitive with like even 10% or less admit rates. And now there is a lot more. And one of the things too that sometimes people forget, admissions people, we are real people. You know, we have some of the same concerns that other people have. And one of the things we know is, particularly in this year, it's been very difficult for a lot of students to take tests. We know a lot of SAT and ACTs have been canceled and canceled at the last minute. We know people have traveled to try to take SATs and ACTs. And the reality is, in the review process, it is only a portion of a review process on all your academics. All your academics, 4 years in high school, okay? Not 3 hours on a test, but what classes did you take and how did you do and how have you progressed? It's so many different things. So test optional really does mean test optional. And so, you know, this is kind of your opportunity there. And we really appreciate the chance to talk with all of you. We wish you best of luck this fall, best of luck in the admissions process, and just keep doing that research and you're going to find that fit.
And one quick plug, University of Wisconsin-Whitewater has free applications right now through the end of this month. So if you're thinking of UW-Whitewater, go ahead and apply. It's free.
And at Michigan State, we don't have free applications, but we're on the Common App, we're on the Coalition app. We have no supplemental essays, so we're very easy to apply to, and we are test optional.
Thank you so much, Larry and Sarah, for presenting with us this evening. I have a very, very quick survey for our participant folks. If you guys would like to scan that QR code, it will take you to our exit survey that will give you guys a little bit more information to give us feedback about this presentation. Again, thank you so much to Sarah and Larry both for presenting this wonderful amount of information and also being able to read off so many of the questions in the Q&A live. I know that's really important for students and families to be able to access later. We do have some additional presentations for our folks who are still with us that will be happening later this week, including holistic admission review. What does that look like? So if test optional or test blind admissions is something that you really want to know more about, we'll absolutely be talking more about that later this week with some of our other college partners. I hope you all have a really wonderful evening and join us for some additional presentations if you'd like. This presentation and the slides will be updated on the Futureology website by the end of the week. So if you'd like to watch a replay or if you'd like to connect with Sarah or Larry additionally and learn a little bit more about their schools, please feel free to do so. Again, thank you guys so much and have a wonderful evening.